Hey everyone, ready to dig into Tata Motors' second quarter. We're going deep with their official press release and some analyst questions that really caught our eye.
It should be interesting. We've got aluminum shortages, a potential surge in electric bus orders.
Oh yeah, it looks like it was a pretty eventful few months for Tata Motors.
Definitely. So maybe let's kick things off with their overall performance.
All right, sounds good.
Well, their consolidated performance is a little bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. Revenue's down a bit, 3.5% to be exact.
Okay, and what does that put them at in terms of actual numbers?
About 101.5 thousand crores. But the good news is they are still profitable. EBITDA came in at 11.6 thousand crores.
Okay, so still in the black, that's got to be a good sign, right?
Mm.
What's the EBITDA margin looking like?
Sitting at 11.4%, although it's down 230 basis points year over year.
Interesting. So revenue's down a bit, but they're still making a profit. What's your take on that?
Well, you have to look at it in context. I mean, there are a lot of companies dealing with supply chain issues, economic slowdowns, things like that.
Right.
So a little dip in revenue for a company like Tata Motors, it's not necessarily a huge red flag, but that shrinking EBITDA margin, it does raise some questions. Are they keeping costs under control as well as they could be? It's something to watch as we go through everything.
All right, noted. So let's move on to Jaguar Land Rover. They've managed to stay profitable for 8 quarters straight now. That's pretty impressive.
8 quarters, yeah. And their revenue was still down, and EBIT margin dropped 220 basis points to 5.1%.
Wow. And didn't they also have some trouble getting aluminum?
Oh, for sure. Those supply chain problems we talked about, they hit JLR hard. Over 6,000 vehicles, that 6,029 to be exact, had to be put on hold for more quality checks, all because of the aluminum shortage.
Oh, wow. So what do you think that means for JLR's reputation? Do you think customers will be understanding?
It's hard to say. Will they be patient or will they start looking at other brands? It's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, you're right. But hey, on the plus side, they've got some exciting new models coming out, right?
Right. The Defender OCTA, for example, it's priced at £145,000 and people are taking notice. And of course, there's a lot of buzz around the upcoming electric Range Rover.
Yeah, those new models are definitely getting some attention. So what does that tell us about JLR's strategy?
Well, it seems like they're tapping into that market for luxury vehicles that also appeal to people who are, environmentally conscious. And they're backing that up with investments. They're putting money into electric vehicle production at their Halewood facility, and they're boosting engine production in Wolverhampton.
So it sounds like they're making some strategic moves.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's switch gears and talk about commercial vehicles. Revenue was down in that segment too, right?
Down, yes. But get this, their profitability actually went up.
Wait, how is that possible? Less revenue, but more profit.
Seems like they've got some pretty effective cost-cutting measures in place, and they've been strategic with their pricing. So even though they sold fewer vehicles, they made more money on each one.
That's really impressive. And we can't forget about the Indian market. The monsoon season and all the infrastructure projects, those have a big impact on commercial vehicles, don't they?
Huge impact, yeah. And speaking of impact, Tata Motors just got a massive order for 1,000 bus chassis. That shows you how strong they are in that segment.
1,000 bus chassis. Wow. Okay, ready for something that might surprise you? Tata Motors is leading the electric vehicle market in India.
It's pretty amazing how quickly they've jumped on the EV bandwagon. And it shows real commitment. The Indian government has been encouraging people to buy EVs with all sorts of incentives.
Right. And Tata's really taking advantage of that, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely. They've launched a bunch of new models, the Curve V, the Curve V.EV, the Nexon ICNG, and they even came out with a new version of the Nexon.EV, but with a bigger battery.
Wow, they're really covering all the bases. So while we're on the topic of passenger vehicles, did you know the Punch is a bestseller in India?
Yeah, it's a big hit over there. Shows you what Indian consumers are looking for: practicality, affordability, and good fuel efficiency.
Makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so let's shift gears again and talk about Tata Motors' financial health. They're aiming to be net debt-free by the end of fiscal year 25. Do you think they can pull it off?
That's a tough one. It's a very ambitious goal. I mean, think about it. They've got all these investments they need to make, and the global economy is, well, unpredictable.
You're not wrong about that.
So to reach that goal, they'll need to be really smart with their finances. It's a delicate balancing act for sure.
Totally. But they seem cautiously optimistic, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, they're aware of the challenges, especially with demand fluctuating so much in the short term. But they're also seeing some promising opportunities for growth.
And what are they pinning their hopes on?
Well, the festive season in India is coming up, That usually leads to a boost in consumer spending. Plus, all those infrastructure investments we talked about, those should benefit the commercial vehicle segment quite a bit.
Okay, before we move on, let's look at some of the questions our analyst has been asking. This one really stood out to me. What about shifts in Tata Motors' global sales, specifically in big markets like India and the UK?
Ah, yeah, that's a big one. And it all ties back to how JLR's doing, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, understanding how sales are doing in different regions, that can tell you a lot about what consumers want, how the markets are changing, where the growth potential is.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, here's another one that got me thinking. How are all these supply chain problems and rising raw material costs affecting things?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. It's been hitting industries worldwide, and Tata Motors is no exception. We've seen how those aluminum shortages hurt JLR's production. And I'm sure other supply chain issues, plus the fluctuating material costs, have played a role in their performance this quarter.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, we can't forget about electric vehicles. One analyst asked specifically about how EV demand has impacted Tata's financials in Q2.
Now, that's where it gets really interesting, right? We know they're a leader in the Indian EV market, but what does that actually mean financially? Is the EV segment really contributing to their bottom line? Are they investing heavily in R&D in building the infrastructure they need to support EV growth? Lots of questions there.
Absolutely. Okay, sticking with financial performance, one analyst is wondering what the EBITDA and margin performance tells us about their operational efficiency.
That's a good question. And it brings us back to that shrinking EBITDA margin, right? It could be that supply chain issues and rising material costs are making things less efficient, but there could be other factors too, like strategic investments, marketing expenses, even changes in their product mix.
Right, so there's more to the story than just that one number.
Exactly. You have to look at the bigger picture.
Okay, so another question that came up, did Tata Motors make any strategic investments or acquisitions this quarter? Anything that could influence their growth down the line?
Well, that's always something to watch for. I mean, strategic investments are essential, especially in the auto industry. Things move so fast. Companies have to stay ahead of the game when it comes to technology, innovation, keeping up with trends. So if Tata made any significant investments or acquisitions this quarter, it could be a clue about where they're headed.
Yeah, it's like a sneak peek into their strategy.
Yeah.
And since they're trying to get rid of all that debt, I imagine investments play a big role in that.
Oh, absolutely. Strategic investments are key to becoming debt-free. They need to make sure those investments generate enough returns, not just to pay off their existing debt, but also to fuel future growth without taking on even more debt. It's a delicate balance.
Right. Okay, so let's talk competition. How did Tata's passenger vehicle sales stack up against their rivals in Q2?
Well, the auto industry is cutthroat, right? So it's important to see how they're doing compared to the competition, both in India and globally. Are they gaining market share? Are they losing ground to new players, especially in the EV segment? Those are the questions we need to be asking.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, on the topic of EVs, one analyst is curious about how Tata plans to deal with the growing competition in that market.
It's a crowded space, for sure. New companies are popping up all the time. And while Tata has a strong position in India, to stay ahead of the game, they're going to have to keep innovating, adapting, maybe even forming some strategic partnerships.
Interesting. Okay, back to the financials for a moment. Did we see any big changes in their debt position or their capital expenditure this quarter?
Those are important factors. If you want to understand their long-term health, you have to look at their debt and their spending. Are they making progress in paying down debt? Are they investing enough in new technologies, new infrastructure? Those financial metrics can tell you a lot about their priorities.
Makes sense. One last question from the analysts. How does Tata's Q2 performance align with their long-term strategy?
Ah, that's the question, isn't it? It forces you to take a step back and look at the big picture. You can't just focus on one quarter's performance. You have to see how it fits into their overall goals. Are they on track to hit their targets? Are they adapting their strategy as the market changes?
So it's all about connecting the dots between what they're doing now and where they want to be in the future.
Exactly. It's about seeing the forest for the trees, as they say.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, were there any red flags raised during Tata's earnings call? Any challenges or risks that we should be aware of?
Well, every company has challenges, right? And it's important for investors and analysts to be aware of those potential roadblocks. Did they mention any specific concerns? Maybe changes in regulations, political instability, potential economic downturns? Understanding their risk assessment and how they plan to deal with those risks, that can tell you a lot about how resilient and adaptable they are.
Right, that's crucial information. Okay, last but not least, What's Tata's outlook for the rest of FY25? And how do they plan to address any potential risks?
Well, we can't predict the future, but we can look at their projections, their plans, and get a sense of what they're expecting. Are they forecasting continued growth? Are they taking steps to mitigate those risks? It's always worth listening to what they have to say.
Absolutely. Wow, those are some really thought-provoking questions from the analysts. We've covered a lot of ground. Global sales, electric vehicles, the financial picture. Tata Motors is definitely operating in a complex and dynamic industry. Lots of opportunities, lots of challenges.
You said it. It's a constantly changing landscape. Understanding these details is key to getting the full picture of Tata Motors' performance and their future prospects.
Well said. Okay, let's take a moment to recap everything we've talked about so far in this deep dive, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
Sounds like a good plan. A quick recap never hurts.
So we've really gone deep here. Aluminum shortages, electric vehicles, all these moving parts. What does it all mean for our listeners?
Well, it seems like Tata Motors is juggling a lot right now. The global economy is still pretty shaky, supply chains are fragile, there's competition everywhere, and yet they're pushing for big things like getting rid of their debt and becoming a leader in India's EV market.
It's a lot to handle. So let's break down what we've learned into some key takeaways. First off, they're still profitable, despite all those challenges. I think that's a testament to how they're adapting and staying resilient.
Right, and their performance in the commercial vehicle segment is a great example of that, especially with India focusing so much on infrastructure. Tata's really aligned their strategy with the right growth drivers. Plus, their early move into electric vehicles, that puts them in a great position to take advantage of that market.
Absolutely. But let's not forget those shrinking EBITDA margins, especially for JLR. It does make you wonder about their cost management and how they're handling all those supply chain headaches.
Yeah, those aluminum shortages really show you just how connected everything is in the global economy and how vulnerable companies can be. Their goal of becoming debt-free is great, but it's going to take some serious financial maneuvering, especially since they have to balance that with all the investments they need to make for future growth. Tough choices.
So if you're thinking about Tata Motors and what the future holds for them, what's the big question you should be asking?
Well, with all these factors in play, the rise of EVs, the uncertainty around global supply chains, and what's happening in the Indian market, where should Tata Motors focus its energy to really succeed in the long run? Where should their priorities lie?
That's a fantastic question. There's no easy answer. But if you take all the insights we've discussed today, you'll be in a great position to analyze the situation and come to your own conclusions. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Tata Motors' second quarter performance.
It's been fascinating, hasn't it? Challenges, opportunities, and maybe even a glimpse into a future where electric vehicles are everywhere? Who knows?
Until next time, keep exploring.